Arrival on Xylox 6. Captain James Hawkins gazed out the viewport of the diplomatic shuttle as it descended through the swirling lavender clouds of Xylox 6. He had been dispatched to this distant alien world to establish official first contact with the Xyloxians, a technologically advanced humanoid species. As the clouds parted, the glimmering crystalline spires of the capital city Xylox Prime came into view, rising from the lush violet foliage like a phantasmal cityscape. Hawkins marveled at the alien architecture, so delicate and organic compared to the utilitarian structures of Earth. The shuttle glided into a circular landing bay atop one of the highest towers. Hawkins took a deep breath, mentally preparing for the momentous encounter to come. As a veteran diplomat of the Interstellar Emissary Court, he had faced down hostile alien warlords and brokered peace treaties between warring space empires. But the Xyloxians represented an entirely unknown quantity. Hawkins strode down the ramp, his polished boots clicking on the iridescent surface. A small delegation awaited him. Tall humanoids draped in shimmering robes, with sleek lilac skin and elegantly swept-back cranial ridges. At the front stood a striking female, her posture regal and confident. She stepped forward, violet eyes assessing Hawkins intently. "Welcome to Xylox Prime, Captain Hawkins. I am Kizora, Chief Emissary to the Xyloxian High Council. It is my honor to escort you during your stay." Her voice was a melodic contralto, tinged with an exotic accent. Hawkins bowed his head respectfully. "The honor is mine, Emissary Kizora. I come in the spirit of friendship and cooperation between our worlds." As he straightened up, Hawkins noticed Kizora sway slightly, her eyes fluttering. She seemed momentarily dazed. One of her attendants reached out a steadying hand, concern etched on his angular features. But Kizora quickly recovered, masking any sign of distress behind a diplomatic smile. "My apologies, Captain. The excitement of this historic moment must have overwhelmed me. Please, follow me. The High Council eagerly awaits your audience." Hawkins fell into step beside Kizora as they navigated the soaring corridors of the tower. He admired the breathtaking views of the city that sprawled below. All graceful lines and luminous surfaces, interwoven with lush green spaces. Flying vehicles zipped between the spires like glowing insects. As they walked, Hawkins became increasingly aware of the unusual attention he was drawing from the Xyloxians they passed. Women would stop and stare, their eyes widening and nostrils flaring. A few even changed direction to fall into step behind him, as if irresistibly drawn. The men, in contrast, cast suspicious or even hostile looks his way. A palpable tension crackled in the air. Hawkins leaned closer to Kizora, keeping his voice low. "Have I committed some cultural faux pas? I seem to be eliciting quite the reaction." Kizora's sculptured brow furrowed. "Not to my knowledge, Captain. Your behavior has been perfectly proper." She glanced over her shoulder at the gaggle of enraptured females accumulating behind them. "I confess, I find my people's response to you highly irregular. It's as if—" She trailed off, shaking her head. "But that's impossible. You're an alien." Hawkins' curiosity was piqued, but he sensed Kizora's reluctance to elaborate. They arrived at a massive set of double doors embossed with intricate spiral designs. Kizora placed her palm on a glossy panel, and the doors slid open with a chime, revealing a cavernous chamber suffused in soft blue light. "The High Council awaits, Captain Hawkins. I shall translate the proceedings." Kizora guided him inside, leaving the fascinated females behind. The chamber was ringed by tiered seats occupied by several dozen Xyloxians of evident rank and importance, garbed in iridescent robes and glittering regalia. In the center of the room, a holographic star map rotated slowly, casting the assembled dignitaries in an ethereal glow. Hawkins stood tall before them, squaring his shoulders. "Esteemed counselors of Xylox 6, I am Captain James Hawkins of the Earth Interstellar Emissary Corps. I come in peace, bearing the goodwill of all humanity, in the hope that our two peoples may embark upon a new era of understanding, trade, and alliance between the stars." As Kizera translated his words into mellifluous Xyloxian, Hawkins scanned the council members' faces. They regarded him with a mix of wonder, calculation, and even fear. The atmosphere was charged, expectant, as if his arrival heralded great change for their civilization, for good or ill. One counselor in particular commanded Hawkins' attention, a female of breathtaking beauty and undeniable authority, seated on an elevated throne-like chair. She was scrutinizing him with fierce intensity, her violet eyes blazing. Hawkins felt strangely stripped bare under her gaze, as if she could peer into his very essence. He suppressed a shiver. There was something uncanny about the Xyloxians and the effect he seemed to have on them. As he continued his address, expounding on the virtues of interstellar cooperation, Hawkins couldn't shake the sense that his arrival had set momentous events into motion, events that could reshape the destiny of both their worlds. Kizara concluded her translation and turned to Hawkins, her expression carefully neutral. But he detected a new wariness in her eyes, and perhaps something else, something hungry and appraising. "You have the Council's thanks for your message of friendship, Captain Hawkins. We shall adjourn to consider your words most carefully. In the meantime, I have been tasked with seeing to your needs and introducing you to our world. I sense your visit shall be historic." As the council chamber emptied, Hawkins pondered the challenges and mysteries ahead. The Xyloxians were truly alien, their culture and motivations opaque. And there was a strange undercurrent to their reactions to him, one he couldn't quite fathom. But he would not falter in his mission to forge a bond between their species, no matter what unexpected obstacles lay ahead. The future of both their civilizations could depend on it. The Xyloxian Queen's request. In the days that followed, Kizara guided Hawkins through the wonders of Xylox Prime, showcasing the marvels of her people's culture and technology. They toured shimmering art galleries, lush hydroponic gardens, and state-of-the-art scientific institutions. All the while, Hawkins remained keenly aware of the aberrant reactions his presence continued to provoke in the Xyloxian females they encountered. Waves of murmuring and agitated pheromonal signals wafted through any crowd he passed, while Kizara grew increasingly tense and distracted at his side. Matters came to a head when a sizable mob of Xyloxian women congregated outside Hawkins' quarters, chanting and keening in eerie unison. Their eyes glowed with a febrile, single-minded intensity. Hawkins watched them fearfully through the reinforced window, deeply unsettled. "What in God's name is happening, Kizara?" he demanded. "Why are they acting this way? It's like they're possessed." Kizara's face was ashen, her knuckles clenched white. I have my suspicions, Captain, but I dare not voice them without proof. The implications are too shocking, too disruptive." She shook her head, as if to dislodge an unthinkable notion. "For now, I must report this development to the High Council and seek guidance." She fixed Hawkins with an unnervingly intense stare. "Remain here, for your own safety. I shall return as soon as I'm able." With that, she slipped out a side entrance, leaving Hawkins alone with his racing thoughts. Hours crawled by with agonizing slowness. Hawkins paced the confines of his elegantly appointed suite, his mind churning with questions and hypotheses. The Xyloxians were so humanoid, so similar to his own people in many ways. What could possibly explain their extreme biological reaction to his mere presence? The more he pondered, the more disquieted he became. Just as he was nearing his wit's end, Kizara returned, her expression grave. "Captain Hawkins, your presence is urgently requested by the High Council. There have been developments." Hawkins followed her out to a waiting hovercar, studiously ignoring the throng of agitated females still milling about outside. As the vehicle arced over the city, Hawkins noted the atmosphere of tension that hung over the spires like a miasma. Xyloxian security forces were out in great numbers, grimly attempting to subdue unruly knots of women who were chanting Hawkins' name. They landed on a heavily guarded platform and were rapidly ushered into the council chamber under a phalanx of armed escorts. The room was in barely controlled uproar. Clusters of councilors argued animatedly, their pheromones jetting in distressed plumes. All fell silent as a hidden door opened and a figure emerged, the striking female counselor whom Hawkins had noted at his initial presentation. She was, if possible, even more breathtaking up close, statuesque and lustrous, moving with preternatural grace. Her gaze locked onto Hawkins with laser intensity, and he felt a physical jolt of connection flam through him. "Counselors, honored guest," she began, her resonant voice effortlessly commanding the room. "I am Valeria, primary matriarch of the Xyloxian Regency. I have convened this emergency session to address the crisis precipitated by Captain Hawkins' arrival on our world." A tumult of anxious clicking rose from the assembled Xyloxians, only to be quelled by a cutting gesture from Valeria. "To put it bluntly," she continued, "the good captain appears to be emitting an astonishingly potent set of pheromonal attractors that are driving our females into a reproductive frenzy." Now the cries could not be contained as the counselors erupted in horrified shock. Kizara's face remained immobile, but her eyes shone with grim validation. Hawkins felt his breath catch in his chest. Him, a walking pheromone bomb to these aliens. It defied belief. Valeria forged ahead, her voice rising above the clamor. "What Captain Hawkins cannot know is that our people are in the grip of an existential crisis. Our birth rates have been steadily declining for generations as our genomes degrade. If we cannot revive our fecundity, the Xyloxian race is doomed to slow extinction." Her intense gaze bored into Hawkins. "Your arrival, Captain, has presented us with a possible salvation, as well as a dire threat to our social order." Hawkins found his voice. "Matriarch, I deeply sympathize with your people's plight. But what exactly are you suggesting? How can I possibly help?" Valeria's eyes gleamed. "My scientists hypothesize that your pheromones could hold the key to restoring our fertility, if we can isolate and synthesize them. But for that, we require your cooperation." She stepped closer, her presence overwhelming. "I propose a bargain, Captain Hawkins. Aid us in this research, provide us with the means to secure our future, and in return the Xyloxian Regency will grant humanity unprecedented economic and scientific benefits, access to our markets, our technology, our wisdom. We would be your staunch allies among the stars." Hawkins' mind reeled at the implications. If he could help save an entire species from extinction, how could he refuse? The potential gains for humanity were staggering. But to become a test subject, to have his biology probed and replicated by aliens, it was a daunting prospect. "I am honored by your proposition, Matriarch, but I must have some time to consider the ramifications. This is not a choice I can make lightly." Valeria inclined her head, a faint smile playing about her lips. "Of course, Captain. I would expect nothing less from a representative of your caliber." She turned to Kizara. "Emissary, please escort the captain back to his quarters. I'm sure he has much to ponder." As they walked the corridors in silence, Hawkins felt the weight of an impossible decision settling on his shoulders. The fate of two civilizations could hinge on his actions in the coming days, and beneath it all thrummed a current of something else, an instinctive pull toward Valeria that both excited and terrified him. The pheromonal attraction, it seemed, cut both ways. Kizara left him at his door with a mute nod, her posture rigid with unspoken tension. Hawkins barely noticed her departure, lost as he was in a whirlwind of clashing duties, fears, and desires. He knew only one thing for certain. His mission to Xylox 6 had become far more complex and pivotal than he ever could have imagined. The very course of history, for both their peoples, now rested squarely on his merely human shoulders. Pheromone research and rioting beauties. Hawkins lay awake for hours that night, his mind churning with the enormity of the choice before him. To submit himself to alien experimentation, to have his body's chemistry probed and replicated. It was a frightening prospect, but weighed against the potential to save an entire species and forge an unbreakable bond between their civilizations. Could he really refuse? By morning, he had made his decision. Hawkins called Kizara and informed her of his intent to cooperate with the matriarch's research proposal, on the condition that all experiments be conducted with his full knowledge and consent, and that any resulting technology be shared equally between their peoples. Kizara relayed his terms to Valeria, and an agreement was quickly reached. And so Hawkins found himself ensconced in a state-of-the-art Xyloxian research facility, surrounded by a team of the planet's top scientists. He was subjected to an endless battery of tests and scans as they worked to unravel the secrets of his pheromonal potency. At the center of it all was Kizara, who had been assigned as Hawkins' personal liaison and research partner. As they worked long hours together, poring over data and refining hypotheses, Hawkins found himself increasingly drawn to the brilliant and enigmatic female. Her quick mind and wry humor were a constant delight, and he came to rely on her steady presence in the face of the often overwhelming alien science. But even as their bond deepened, Hawkins couldn't help but notice the strain that Kizara was under. She often seemed distracted, her gaze lingering on him with an unsettling intensity. More than once, he caught her furtively messaging on her compad, her expression troubled. Matters came to a head one evening as they were working late in the lab. Kizara was leaning over Hawkins' shoulder, examining a particularly intriguing data set, when he became acutely aware of her proximity. Her scent enveloped him, a dizzying musk that sent his pulse racing. Kizara's breath hitched, her eyes dilating to deep pools of black. "James," she murmured, her usually crisp voice husky. Hawkins turned to face her, his skin prickling with anticipation. "Kizara, what's happening?" She swayed toward him, her pheromones engulfing him in an invisible cloud of need. I can't fight it anymore. The attraction, it's too strong." Their lips met in a searing kiss, and Hawkins felt himself drowning in sensation. Kizara's cool fingers roved over his body, leaving trails of tingling desire in their wake. He crushed her to him, marveling at the alien perfection of her form. A shattering crash jolted them apart. The lab's door had burst open, revealing a phalanx of armed Xyloxian guards. At their head was Valeria, her face a mask of cold fury. "Seize them," she snapped, and the guards surged forward. Hawkins and Kizara found themselves dragged before a hastily convened session of the High Council, still disheveled and dazed. Valeria loomed over them, her earlier warmth replaced by an icy disdain. "Captain Hawkins, emissary Kizara, you stand accused of grossly violating the terms of our research agreement. Explain yourselves." Hawkins struggled to marshal his racing thoughts. "Matriarch, I assure you, we never intended." "Spare me your assurances," Valeria cut him off. "Did you really think you could keep your little tryst secret? That I wouldn't have surveillance on my own scientists?" She turned to Kizara, her voice dripping with scorn. "And you, emissary, to think you would throw away your duty, your very loyalty to your species, over some alien pheromone-induced infatuation. You disgust me." Kizara visibly wilted under the matriarch's withering glare, but Hawkins saw a flicker of defiance in her eyes. "It's not infatuation," she said quietly. "It's real." The chamber erupted into bedlam. Counselors surged to their feet, shouting in outrage and disbelief. Valeria had to bellow for silence. "Real," she sneered. "Don't delude yourself, Kizara. This human's body chemistry has clearly compromised your faculties." She addressed the council. "Honored members, it's clear that Captain Hawkins' presence has become too disruptive to our society. I move that he be confined to quarantine for the duration of the research, and that emissary Kizara be removed from the project immediately." "No," Kizara cried. "You can't do this. James is our only hope. We need him." "What we need," Valeria said coldly, "is to restore order and focus to this critical work. Guards, remove the captain to secure quarters, and take the emissary into custody for questioning." As the guards closed in, Hawkins locked eyes with Kizara, trying to pour all his feelings into a single glance. Her expression was anguished but resolute. "It will be all right, James," she whispered as they were pulled apart. "Trust me." Hawkins held onto those words like a talisman as he was marched down to the bowels of the facility and sealed into a sterile white cell, alone, ripped away from Kizara and the vital work they had begun. He could only pray that her faith was not misplaced. The future of both their worlds could depend on it. Hours bled into days in the featureless confines of his cell. Hawkins paced restlessly, his mind consumed with worry for Kizara and frustration at his helplessness. The only breaks in the monotony were the regular visits by grim-faced Xyloxian scientists who continued to subject him to an array of tests and extract samples. Then, one day, everything changed. A massive explosion rocked the facility, sending Hawkins tumbling to the floor. Alarms blared and emergency lights strobed as the sound of running feet and shouted orders filtered through the walls. With a hiss and a clank, the door to Hawkins' cell unsealed itself and slid open. He cautiously peered out into the corridor, and his heart leaped. There, standing in the doorway wreathed in smoke and an aura of fierce determination, was Kizara. "James," she said urgently, "we have to go now. The matriarch's agents are right behind me." Hawkins surged forward and clasped her hands. "Kizara, what's going on? What are you doing here?" "Saving your life," she said grimly, "and our only chance at ending this crisis. Valeria has been lying to us all. Come on, I'll explain on the way." She pressed a small, sleek pistol into his hand, and then they were running, racing through the chaotic corridors of the besieged facility. All around them, the sounds of conflict raged. The zap of energy weapons, the cries of the wounded, the shattering of glass and rending of metal. As they ducked and wove through side passages and maintenance ducts, Kizara laid out a tale of secrets and betrayal that left Hawkins reeling. Valeria, she revealed, had never intended to share the pheromone technology with humanity. Her plan was to extract Hawkins' secrets and then use them to establish total Xyloxian supremacy in the galaxy under her own unquestioned rule. Kizara and a small group of loyal counselors had uncovered the plot and mounted this desperate 11th-hour coup to stop her. "So all this chaos," Hawkins panted as they hunkered down in a deserted lab to catch their breath. "Your people are fighting each other." Kizara's face was etched with pain. "Yes, Valeria's supporters are formidable, but the majority of the council has sided with us. If we can just get you off-world with the pheromone data, we can rally the full support of our military and end this madness." Hawkins gripped her shoulder. "Then let's finish this. For both our peoples." She covered his hand with her own, her gaze fierce and loving. Together, united in purpose, they forged ahead through the embattled facility, determined to reach the shuttle bay and the promise of escape. But little did they know, the true test of their bond and the mettle of their species was yet to come. Fugitives and the fertility cure. Hawkins and Kizara raced through the war-torn corridors of the research facility, the sounds of battle raging all around them. They were a blur of desperate motion, Kizara leading the way with her intimate knowledge of the building's layout, Hawkins guarding their rear with his newly acquired Xyloxian pistol. As they ran, Hawkins couldn't help but marvel at Kizara's courage and resolve. She had risked everything, her position, her reputation, even her life, to uncover Valeria's deceit and free him. The depth of her commitment to justice, to him, was staggering. They rounded a corner and skidded to a halt, confronted by a squad of Valeria's elite guards. The Xyloxians opened fire without hesitation, energy bolts sizzling through the air. Hawkins and Kizara dove for cover, returning fire from behind a shattered piece of lab equipment. "We're too exposed here," Kizara shouted over the din of combat. "We need to find another route." Hawkins nodded grimly, popping up to squeeze off a few shots that sent the guards ducking for cover. "Lead the way." They burst through a side door and found themselves in a cavernous storage hangar. Towering shelves of scientific equipment and supplies stretched out before them, offering a maze of potential hiding spots. Kizara pulled Hawkins into the shadows of a large shipping container. For a moment they stood there, chests heaving, adrenaline coursing through their veins. "James," Kizara whispered urgently, "if we don't make it out of here." Hawkins silenced her with a fierce kiss, pouring all his love and determination into the embrace. "We will make it, Kizara. We've come too far to fail now." She nodded, her eyes shining with emotion. "You're right. We have to keep moving." They crept through the labyrinthine stacks, ears straining for any sound of pursuit. The hangar was eerily quiet, the distant throb of battle muffled by the towering shelves. Suddenly, Kizara froze, her gaze locked on a particular container. "James, look." She pointed to a series of markings on the crate's side, her voice thrumming with excitement. "That's the sequencing tag for the pheromone synthesis trials. The data we need could be in there." Hawkins frowned. "Can we risk the time to check? Valeria's forces could be right behind us." Kizara hesitated for a split second, then squared her shoulders. "We have to try. This could be our only chance." Together, they pried open the container's locks and hauled out the rack of data drives within. Kizara plugged her compad into the central drive and began rapidly scrolling through the files. "Yes," she crowed triumphantly, her face lit by the glow of the screen. "It's here, James. The complete sequencing data and synthesis protocols. With this, any competent lab could begin producing a pheromone-based fertility treatment." Hawkins felt a surge of elation tempered by trepidation. "Then let's grab it and go. We need to get this into the right hands." Kizara disconnected her compad, and they moved to exit the container, only to find their way blocked by the imposing figure of matriarch Valeria herself, flanked by a phalanx of armed guards. "Well, well," Valeria purred, her voice dripping with malice. "The lovebirds, caught in their nest, and with the precious pheromone data, no less. How very convenient." Hawkins moved to shield Kizara, his pistol trained on Valeria. "It's over, matriarch. Your plot is exposed. The Council will never let you seize power now." Valeria laughed, a chilling sound devoid of mirth. "Oh, you naive boy. Do you really think the Council matters anymore? With the data you so obligingly collected, I'll soon have the power to bend every Xyloxian in the galaxy to my will. I'll be unstoppable." "You're insane," Kizara spat. "Our people will never bow to a tyrant like you." "They won't have a choice," Valeria sneered. "Thanks to your human pet here, I'll soon have an army of billions, slave to my pheromonal control. I will be their goddess, and they will worship me." She motioned to her guards. "Take them. And be sure to secure that data drive. It's the key to our glorious future." The guards advanced, energy rifles humming with deadly intent. Hawkins and Kizara exchanged a glance fraught with desperate resolve. In that frozen moment, a lifetime of understanding passed between them. Then they exploded into motion. Hawkins fired wildly, forcing the guards to dive for cover. Kizara, in a blur of speed, ripped a small cylindrical device from her belt and hurled it at the ceiling. "James, run," she screamed, grabbing his hand and pulling him away. A heartbeat later, a tremendous explosion rocked the hangar. The device, Hawkins realized dimly, had been some kind of high-yield grenade. The blast wave sent them tumbling, ears ringing, vision strobing with afterimages. Somehow, they staggered to their feet in the smoke and confusion. Valeria and her guards were nowhere to be seen, buried under an avalanche of twisted metal and shattered plasteel. "Come on," Kizara coughed, tugging Hawkins toward a cargo access port. "The shuttle bay is just through here." Bruised and bloodied, they stumbled into the cavernous expanse of the shuttle bay. A sleek courier ship sat on the landing pad, its engines already thrumming with pre-launch warm-up. But as they sprinted across the open ground, a searing bolt of energy sizzled past Hawkins' head. He whirled to see Valeria stalking toward them, her once pristine robes tattered and scorched, her face a mask of rage. In her hand, An oversized pistol glowed with ominous power. "You will not defy me," she screamed, her voice ragged with fury. "I am the savior of my species, the architect of our destiny. I will not be denied by some mewling alien and his traitor whore." She raised the weapon, its muzzle yawning like the mouth of oblivion, only to jerk and stumble as a hail of energy bolts stitched across her body. Hawkins watched in amazement as a group of Xyloxian soldiers emerged from the shadows, Kizara's allied counselors at their head. Matriarch Valeria, the lead counselor, intoned solemnly, "By the authority of the High Council of Xylox 6, you are hereby relieved of command and placed under arrest for high treason against the Xyloxian people." Valeria, impossibly, staggered back to her feet, her eyes wild. "Fools," she hissed through gritted teeth. "You cannot stop the tide of history. I will lead our people to glory, to dominion." She raised her pistol once more, aiming not at Hawkins or Kizara, but at the phalanx of soldiers. "If I cannot rule, then I will see our world burn." Time seemed to slow to a crawl. In the space between one heartbeat and the next, Hawkins saw the madness consuming Valeria, saw her finger tighten on the trigger. He knew, with a sudden, crystalline certainty, that he could not allow her deranged vision to come to pass. Hawkins leaped, throwing himself into the line of fire even as Valeria's pistol roared. He felt a searing agony pierce his chest, felt himself falling. And then he was cradled in Kizara's arms, her anguished face hovering above him, as shouts and weapons fire erupted around them. "James. No, no, please hold on." Tears streamed down her face, mingling with the blood welling from his wound. Darkness nibbled at the edges of his vision, a seductive whisper urging him to let go, to sink into oblivion. But Hawkins fought it, clinging to the fading light of Kizara's eyes. The data," he gasped, every word an agony. "You have to get it to your people." "I will, James. I promise." Kizara's voice was thick with grief, but beneath it ran a steely determination. "Your sacrifice won't be in vain. You've given my people hope, a future. And you." Hawkins reached up, his bloody fingers tracing the contours of her beloved face. "You've given me everything." The darkness swelled, a tidal wave crashing over him. The last thing Hawkins saw before it consumed him utterly was Kizara's face, etched with love and an unbreakable resolve. Then the void took him, and he knew no more. The cure, the queen, and the future. Darkness, silence, a void without end, without form. Then, slowly, sensation, the faintest whisper of sound. A muffled beeping, distant voices, the gradual awareness of a body heavy and leaden. With a titanic effort, James Hawkins opened his eyes. He found himself lying in a bed in an unfamiliar room, all gentle curves and soothing colors. Alien screens displayed alien writing. And yet, the medical nature of his surroundings was unmistakable. "James?" A voice, achingly familiar, tentatively hopeful. "Can you hear me?" With painful slowness, Hawkins turned his head. There, seated beside his bed, her beautiful face drawn with exhaustion and worry, was Kizara. "Hey," he croaked, his voice a dry rasp. "Guess I made it after all." Kizara's eyes brimmed with tears, her smile tremulous. "You did, but it was a near thing. The matriarch's shot nearly killed you, if our doctors hadn't." She trailed off, visibly collecting herself. "But you're safe now. It's over. We won." Hawkins struggled to sit up, gasping at the bolt of pain in his chest. "Valeria." "Dead," Kizara said flatly, cut down by the Council's forces as she tried to shoot her way out. "Her supporters have been rounded up. The coup is finished." Hawkins sagged back, his mind whirling as memories flooded back. The frantic escape, the confrontation in the hangar, the searing agony of Valeria's shot. He turned to Kizara urgently. "The pheromone data. Did you?" She nodded, her smile broadening. "We did it, James. The data is secured. Our best scientists are already working to synthesize a fertility treatment. It's going to take time and a lot of work, but you've given us a real chance. You saved us." Hawkins reached out, clasping her hand in his. "We saved each other." For a long moment they sat in silence, savoring the simple miracle of touch of survival. Finally Hawkins stirred. "So what happens now? With us, I mean." Kizara's face clouded. I don't know, James. The Council is in upheaval. The whole planet is reeling from Valeria's betrayal. And there's still so much work to do, to stabilize our government, to rebuild trust with the people." Hawkins felt his heart clench. "You're needed here. Your people need you to lead them." She nodded miserably. "I have a duty, a responsibility. But James, what I feel for you." He squeezed her hand. "I know. And I feel the same. But this is bigger than us. You have a chance to guide your world into a new era that's too important to walk away from." Kizara closed her eyes, tears spilling down her cheeks. "You're right. I know you're right. But it isn't fair. After all we've been through." Hawkins tugged her closer, ignoring the twinge in his chest. "Hey, this isn't the end for us. You've got a planet to put back together, and I've got a heck of a report to file back on Earth. But once things settle down, once your people are on their feet." Kizara rested her forehead against his. "I'll find you," she whispered fiercely. "No matter how long it takes, no matter the distance, we will be together again. I swear it." They sealed the promise with a kiss, pouring all their love, their grief, their fragile and defiant hope into the embrace. And so, in a bittersweet flurry of preparation and tearful farewells, James Hawkins found himself standing once more in the sun-dappled courtyard where his journey had begun a lifetime ago. His wounds were healing, but his heart was heavy as he readied himself to depart this world and the woman he had grown to love more than life. But even as he boarded the waiting shuttle, even as he watched the spires of Xylox Prime dwindle beneath him, Hawkins held tight to a kernel of warmth in his chest. The promises he and Kizara had made, the bond they had forged in the crucible of crisis, those could never be broken, not by time nor distance, nor all the cold void of space. He would return to Earth, to his duty and his people. He would be the bridge between their worlds, the champion of the alliance they had fought and bled to build. And someday, when the work was done, and the scars had faded, he would find his way back to her. For theirs was a love that had changed the course of worlds, that had brought hope to a dying species and illuminated the best of humanity. Theirs was a story that had only just begun. James Hawkins leaned back in his seat, his gaze fixed on the stars streaking past the viewport, and smiled. The future was bright, and he couldn't wait to meet it. EPIOGU. The years pass, as years must. On Earth, James Hawkins becomes a hero, celebrated for his daring and his pivotal role in forging the first true alliance between humanity and an alien race. Under his tireless leadership, the bonds between Earth and Xylox 6 grow stronger, a shining example of interstellar cooperation. And on that distant world, High Counselor Kizara guides her people into a new age of prosperity and hope. The pheromone-based fertility treatment, born from Hawkins' sacrifice and Kizara's determination, revitalizes the Xyloxian population. A generation once doomed to slow extinction now looks to the stars with renewed vigor and ambition. But even as they work to build a brighter future for their respective worlds, James and Kizara never forget the promises they made, the love they shared. They stay in contact as best they can, stolen moments of holographic conversation, and long, aching letters sent on interstellar data streams. Until finally, after a decade of longing and labor, their paths converge once more. It is a momentous occasion, the 10-year anniversary of the signing of the Earth-Xylox Accords. A grand celebration is planned on Xylox Prime. And of course, James Hawkins tops the guest list. He steps off his shuttle onto that achingly familiar soil, his heart in his throat. And there, resplendent in formal robes of office, is Kizara. But she is not alone. At her side stands a young girl, perhaps 8 years old. A girl with Kizara's elegant bone structure, Kizara's striking violet eyes. But her hair, her smile, the tilt of her chin, those are all James. "Daddy," the girl cries out, running to him with her arms outstretched. "I knew you'd come back. Mommy said you would." And as James Hawkins sweeps his daughter into his arms, as he meets Kizara's gaze over the child's head and sees there the same love, the same joy, the same promise of a future bright and bold and brimming with possibility, he knows one thing beyond any doubt. Every trial, every sacrifice, every moment of pain and desperation, it was all worth it, for it led them here to this perfect, shining instant. And as he holds his family close, as he feels the warmth of their embrace and the beat of their hearts against his, James Hawkins knows that no matter what the future holds, they will face it as they always have, together.